Sports Talk Daily with Andrew Hustler Paterson and Michael Remis.
What is up, everybody? Welcome to another week of Winnipeg Sports Talk and Winnipeg Sports Talk Daily. Andrew Paterson, Michael Remis with you, and of course doing it on a Tuesday after the August long weekend. What a weekend it was. We got a lot to get to. A big trade in the National Hockey League, a three-teamer involving the Norris Trophy winning Erik Karlsson. Big week in the Canadian Football League, and the Bombers getting ready to get right back at it this week. End of the Sea Bears season as well, and all sorts of other events. Some involving athletes, some involving celebrities, some a combination of both. And we'll get to all of that coming up on today's show. Should be a great one. Welcome to everyone with us on YouTube. And shout out to everyone listening to the Winnipeg Sports Talk podcast. Podcast listeners, check out the YouTube channel, Winnipeg Sports Talk. And of course, just hit that red subscribe button and vice versa. If you are finding us on YouTube or normally get us on YouTube, the show is always ready to go shortly after we finish the live stream. Just Winnipeg Sports Talk, wherever you get your favorite pods, and subscribe there as well. Just before we bring in Michael Remis, do want to mention we are going to have Moe Khan come on from Montreal later on in the program. Interested to get Moe's take on the Habs side of things in this three-way deal, as well as a little CFL talk with Moe and maybe his thoughts on the CEBL. Unfortunately, probably won't be talking as much CEBL now that the Sea Bears are done after another record-breaking crowd on Friday night. We'll get to all of that in a minute. But just before we do, a big thanks to the sponsors that make this show happen each and every day. Our friends at Coolbet Canada, Princess Auto, Canadian Club, Manitoba Battery, Modern Man, and Aquatech. And by the way, stay tuned to our social channels. We've got a great contest we're launching today with Aquatech all week long on Instagram, where you can win 3 4-day passes to see the upcoming Manitoba Open, along with Winnipeg Jet and Morgan Barron in the mix over at Southwood. Our friends at Vita Health Fresh Market, Wallace & Wallace, Nick and Nicky DQ and F Apparel, Royal Sports, BP, Consolidated Supply, the Gold Eyes, Assiniboia Downs, Breezy Bend, Little Brown Jug, and a special thanks to our friends at Aitken's Lake. Just got back yesterday afternoon from an incredible long weekend at Aitken's Lake. Great sponsors of ours, and honestly, my favorite 3 or 4 days of the year. Every year we had gorgeous weather. We had some great fishing, some amazing time in Big Molly's, great food back at the lodge, and just the incredible hospitality of the Aikens family. So special thanks to our guides, Kieran and Tyson. Did a great job of getting us to the spots where we could bang off some big ones. And again, Pitt, Julie, Pat, Janelle, the entire Aikens family. As I always say, as great as the fishing is, the hospitality is even better. Cannot wait to do it again next year. If you want some more information on Aikens, go to aikenslake.com. All right, let's get Remo in here to get this show on the road. How was the weekend? How was the show on Friday?
Well, it was a great show. I was happy the Bombers won. Way more fun after a win, because if they would have lost to BC, would not have been great, and putting up 50 points. So that was fun, and we had a great show, a ton of guests. Showed it to everyone who came on. Kurt Contois, I don't know if you took his advice on the Manitoba Derby. He had some solid picks. Also won the marble race, Kurt Contois, so we owe him a hoodie.
Incredible. Kurt comes on the show and wins the marble race. That's never been done before.
And then, we talked Bombers, Ed Tate, and Mike Morreale, CEBL commissioner. So check that out from Friday. And also Ken Wiebe, I think, set the record on Friday for the longest answer ever given on the show. I clocked it at 18 minutes. So check that out from Friday's show.
Excuse me?
Yes. 18. So 18-minute answer. I asked him. I had everything planned out to the second on Friday because we had 6 guests. I was like, how am I going to do this? And 2 of them were pre-taped with Mike Morreale and Andrew Collier. A huge week for the Gold Eyes, too. I know you're taking part of the luncheon this week. So I was like, okay, it's 2:03. I could ask Ken a question. You know, we can fit this in. If it goes a bit long, it's not bad. He didn't stop talking till It was like, I think it was two. It ends up talking to like 220, 222. I asked him, all right, Ken, who's the Jets' second line center? And he basically went through every possible line combination the Jets could have, which leads me to believe that we have no idea who the Jets' second line center is. It's that kind of off season. So thank you, but thank you, Ken, for hopping on.
I'm just trying to wrap my head around an 18-minute answer. Like,
go watch it. Yeah,
is Bailey here, the official intern?
she is.
In the chat. Bailey, your intern duties, we haven't really assigned any, but if you want to, what part of when, as you get more involved in interning duties, one of the things that one has to do at times is transcribe answers.
Yeah.
If you would like to transcribe Ken's epic answer from Friday, that maybe we could post it somewhere. I'm not sure whether we'd need multiple posts or not, but be very interesting to see what that looks as a written answer.
So
as opposed to it.
Yeah, because of all that, and I had the pre-recorded interviews, we ended up going super long on the show. I was like, well, Huss isn't here. We can go as long. I think we went to like 3:40. So they had to get the marble race in, and we had Hacksaw. Great talk with Hacksaw about the NFL Hall of Fame on the weekend, and Kurt Courtois on the Downs. Then I had the pre-record, so we did the marble race too. Had to get that in, and I was teasing the live Puck Doku, but I was actually going to do it on Immaculate Grid, and their site stopped working, so I couldn't even do that. And then I did a visual mute as I showed off my answers. So it was a fun show Friday. We all had a great long weekend. I know you were at the lake. I got out to Winnipeg Beach and Gimli, checked out some of the rides there in Gimli.
Oh, they had a big midway. Oh, is that Island Dingadongarum?
It was
Maybe
Icelandic
the
Festival.
Icelandic Festival.
So they had the rides. Kind of funny. It was like the exact same rides like when I was a kid. There hadn't really been new ride innovations. I don't know. I don't really know how the whole thing.
Do they have corn dogs?
I think I don't know. I didn't look at any of the food.
It's not really a fair without a good corn dog vendor, if you ask me. But
I didn't look at the food.
Did have that.
I missed it. I saw there was a Donair truck, which caught my eye, but I was chasing around 4-year-old, so.
Yeah, you didn't quite have time to.
I can't really. Yeah, I can't really. But we had a great time.
I'm just still listen. I'm having a hard time speaking or concentrating about anything other than this 18-minute answer from Ken. I'm gonna need to get into that, and I can't wait to have Ken on. Jason, well, anyone that recalls the old shows on 1290 will remember Kevin Woodley, and Woodley's been on with us before, and Woodley in the game is sort of notorious for having like some of the longest answers ever. And I know that when TSN 1260 went down, Jason Gregor, who'd been doing his show there for, 10, 15 years, did say that in the stats, the longest answer in the history of the show was Kevin Woodley at 6 minutes and 45 seconds. So essentially what you're telling me is that Ken Wiebe not only smashed the record, but maybe raised the bar so high that no one will ever come even close to touching the longest answer in talk show history.
And I got to take responsibility. I'm the host. I have to have control of the show. I could have interrupted. That would not have
happened on my watch. I will say that.
I could have interrupted him. I could have wrote him a message like, "Hey, wrap it up." But I don't know. Like I just was like thought it was gonna end like any minute now. Once you get so long. And also, like, you kind of want to see, like, okay, how long is this going to go after you get to a certain point?
How long can it go?
It's what you want to. So it's way more fun talking about it now than me interrupting him. This is way more fun. So I like Ken. Actually, the big question for Ken, this is how I started off. Ken, where were you when you found out about the Rasmus Kupari signing? Because it's that point in the summer, and he was like on a boat on a lake, and then texted me a picture yesterday of him looking at his phone while on the boat. It was actually amazing that it captured the exact moment. So I take responsibility, and I don't know if Ken was trying to go along to help me out because he thought he needed to go along. I don't know what his thought process was. Might have to do we could do 2 hours on that answer, I think.
We might do, you know what? We'll do a special show at one point where we break it down. We'll have Bailey's transcription of it going through. We may have to separate it into multiple segments. But we can break it down and then we'll figure out what it all was. Anyways, having a little fun with Kenny, but we always appreciate him coming on. I just didn't think it was human. Listen, I talk for 2 hours a day. Often I will stretch things out if need be. The concept of spending 18 minutes on the same answer is, listen, it takes a special gift and a special talent. And Ken is our guy.
I think it also just speaks to how we have no idea who the Jets' second-line center is. You ask someone, and they go for 18 minutes speculating. Well, it could be this option, or it could be this option. We don't know who it's going to be. Is it Villardi? Does Perfetti get a shot? Does Nemestikov go there? And Ken just went through basically every possible combination. So I think it just speaks to just how unknown this Jets lineup is.
And no one will ever give Ken a hard time about not being thorough and touching on every aspect of the question that was there. So we move on. Listen, you know what? We're going to be getting into this trade, and I'm looking forward to doing that. We'll talk about that in a minute, and obviously the CFL. But Remo, I was over the moon to be able to be off the grid and out at Aikens Lake, and I wouldn't trade that for anything. However, I was feeling a little bit of FOMO on Friday night, knowing that you and about 11,000 other people were going to be packing that rink for the Sea Bears game. Obviously, it didn't go well for the home team on the scoreboard. But what can you say about the support of Winnipeg for the Sea Bears and the first season that they've had here in Winnipeg? I think about the Thunder, when the Thunder debuted, and I was just a kid selling tickets for the Jets at the time, but, had the opportunity because a lot of the people in the office didn't really care about basketball. Got a chance to go to a ton of those games. And, the first ever game, I believe, was around, might have even been over 11,000 at Winnipeg Arena. But it did, and it wasn't that the Winnipeg Thunder weren't supported as much, it's that the league was a joke. And halfway through the season, a 6-team league became a 5-team league, became a 4-team league, and then they just basically made up a championship series involving the Thunder and the Dayton Wings at the time, which I've talked about before. I'm pretty sure it was fixed, but that's another conversation at another time. This Sea Bears season, they started off hot and continued to grow. And, you just wonder what it would be like if there was another couple of weeks of the season and a few more games as to where they'd be. That being said, you were there. And, as far as the actual game went, for the second straight time, just had a tough time bouncing the Stingers, especially without EJ in the lineup.
Yeah, I don't know what it is about the Stingers. They didn't have as good of a record, against the rest of the league as they did as Sea Bears, but they really had the Sea Bears number. But, more importantly, you had to put us a power poll, Winnipeg sports stories of the summer. Is the Sea Bears number one ahead of, Dubois or anything the Bombers have done, this 50-point game?
Well, it's pretty clearly the Jets' second-line center. I'm not sure anyone could rip off 18 minutes on any of these other topics.
But I'll say, what a great atmosphere. 10,000, the official attendance number, 10,580. They opened the upper deck and the tickets just kept selling. Cardinal official at halftime and pregame. People are going there. They're having a good time. The basketball, it got pretty loud off the start, and I think at the end, when they got into the target score range, the Sea Bears were down a couple baskets, but when they, hit a big shot to make it within one basket of Edmonton, it got loud in there. It got intense. It was playoff basketball. It was fun. It had big game feeling. I was sitting behind Rod Black, courtside. It was on TSN 4. If you wanted to watch it, it was cool, and I think the CBL, they got something good going. I like the shorter schedule. It was short and sweet, and I think everyone was there for a good time. The merch lines are out of control at the Sea Bears games. So huge success. I think beyond anyone could have imagined, and the city has definitely embraced the team.
There's no doubt about it. It was a magical summer. And listen, I can't wait for next season. And I hope we get that CEBL championship tournament here. I think Winnipeg would be an amazing host. And by the way, I know the Gitch was at the game and had a great video of the Cardinal official performance, I think, from halftime. Okay, listen, I probably shouldn't just gloss over this very quickly. BA says in chat, I want us to give details as to why the games was fixed. Wasn't the game as much was fixed. This is the Thunder and the Dayton Wings in the, I don't know, whatever the first year was, like 92 WBL finals. The Dayton was the best team all year. The Thunder were like, I think, fifth or so. But then teams ahead of them started folding. And the Thunder had such great fan support that, there was certainly a market to have more games in Winnipeg. So they decided that the league would be determined in a best-of-5 championship series. All games in Winnipeg. But what was the kicker of this was that the players were going to be paid by the game. So the first two games went as you would expect. I mean, Dayton, pumped the Thunder and was up 2-0. And then, if they won game 3, the series was over. But if they lost the next 2 games and went to 5, they'd get 2 more game checks. So you can imagine what happened. It was Brick City in games 3 and game 4. And somehow the scrappy Thunder managed to win game 3 and 4 and put it to a 5th game. And then the 5th game was a massacre from my recollection. So it wasn't, I will always remember, no one in the media really touched it, but I've talked about this before on 1290 when we were having kind of old basketball memories of Winnipeg, that there is zero chance that entire series was up on the level because there was one team that was way better than the other and basically purposely bricked games 3 and 4 to get 2 extra checks. And then I'm sure there were some people that bought in, wow, the Thunder are coming back. They're right back in this. It didn't end that way. So there's your little WBL trip down history lane as we talk about the Sea Bears. There was some great news, though, speaking of the Sea Bears, Reem. Teddy Buckets is a finalist for MVP, and Simon Hildebrand, a finalist for the U Sports Player of the Year. And I got to tell you, I mean, I'll admit that I don't know much about the other teams and which U Sports guys were playing, but I have to think that with, the amount of time that Hildebrand played for Winnipeg, that he'll be right there. He was the number 1 overall pick in the draft, played way more than I think most people and probably even he expected, and what a season was for him. So not surprised that there's some individual accolades coming to some Sea Bears players, or at least consideration for it after the season that they had.
Yeah, Simon Hildebrand, we had him on the show. It was a great conversation with him. Fantastic season. You weren't sure, how many of these U Sports guys were actually going to play, but he was a big part of the team. And I loved whenever he went to the line, the MVP chants for Teddy Buckets, Teddy Allen nominated. So we'll find out tomorrow. That'll be pretty cool. And hey, and Jelani Watson-Gale nominated for 6th man. He had to play a bigger role with EJ out, being called up to Team Nigeria. So it was a great first season for the Sea Bears. Now, I think just the nature of the league, we don't really know what the team is going to look like next year, but I know that there's going to be huge fan support, and hopefully they can follow it up. And I did see a bit of the Edmonton-Calgary game on TSN. I love how the games are on TSN. Rod Black calling. Just you're in the arena. It has big game feel, big game production. I know a number of people in our chat checked out the game for the first time. Bardo says Sea Bears spectators more lively than Jets fans, which I have heard from a couple people saying that they're enjoying the games more than Jets games, which is crazy to think. But people here love their basketball. So we're a basketball town now.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I think there's some element of low-lying fruit. It's somewhat become, for whatever reason, it's fun to say, something's good. Well, let's take that and shit on something else. Yeah. And, I mean...
well, I think that you're going to compare it to the other times you're in the building. And I think there's also some recency bias and
You think?
And so but I think, look, it's summer, nice, the summer we've had the Bombers, Goldeyes, Sea Bears, Sea Bears, Valor. I did all four in like a week span, so I think that's kind of cool, actually.
Definitely is. All right, listen, we're going to get Hammer's going to jump on in about 15 minutes. And Remo and I are going to get into this trade. And we'll talk about that coming up with Jeff as well. But just before we do that, let me give a shout out to our friends over at Modern Man Barber Shop, now with 8 locations in Winnipeg, including the newest locations on Pembina Highway and Plessis Road. Modern Man, I think I might need a little trip to Modern Man coming up, offers a variety of grooming services. I'm in the need of a haircut, but if you have a beard and need beard shaping, they've got you covered there. Want a professional shave? Check. Color services and more, and a great selection of men's hair and men's care products. All there. Book your look via modernmanbarber.com and follow them on Instagram at Modern Man Barber Shops. Do want to mention, and again, this will be up during the show. If you're listening to the podcast, it'll already be up. Big contest with our friends at Aquatech. We're sponsoring the Manitoba Open as part of the Fortinet Cup Series on PGA Tour Canada. Morgan Barron playing in it. Get on over to our Instagram and enter to win 2 3-packs of tournament passes, which will get you in Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday out at Southwood. Of course, Aquatech is the great sponsor of ours, and why not make 2023 the year you take the plunge? Get on over to aqua-tech.ca to design your own custom pool. They can provide you with on-the-spot pricing from designers as well as financing options that suit you. And, of course, whole home renovations start with Aquatech. Thousands of renos is their foundation. Let Aquatech upgrade any space in your home. Of course, WST brought to you in part by Aquatech with limited install dates left. Visit Aquatech in-store or online to learn how they can make your in-ground or above-ground pool dreams a reality. Again, more info at aqua-tech.ca. I know a lot of you got out on the long weekend, did a lot of fun things, and that was probably Manitoba Battery that were powering your good times. In the winter, we're worrying about getting from point A to point B, and they've got the best prices on car and truck batteries. But right now, whether you're in a boat, a Sea-Doo, an ATV, a camper, Manitoba Battery has them all at the best prices in town. Shop local. Don't waste your time at the big box stores. And Manitoba Battery will make that purchase even easier by delivering it to you anywhere in the city for free with any purchase over $60. It's that easy. Get on down to manitobabattery.com. Give them a phone call or pop by and see them at 1026 Logan Avenue. And had a few CC and Gingers on the weekend, that is for sure. Man, those are great drinks and so easy to pull around if you get them in the pre-mixed cocktail in a can at your local beer vendor. I know it's been a little sketchy getting into the LC lately. I think it's a full-fledged strike today. But you can get Canadian Club and ginger ale in 473 milliliter cans at your favorite beer store as well. And of course, when the LCs are open, you can get all the great family of Canadian Club products, Canada's favorite Canadian whiskey. All right, Reem, we'll kind of dive into more on the Bombers and the CFL with Hamilton, and we'll talk about this. But what was your first reaction on Sunday when you got that notification that Erik Karlsson had actually been traded to the Pittsburgh Penguins?
My reaction was sweet. Trade in the summer. Can't wait to talk about this on Tuesday with Huss. And then I was like, yeah, they actually did this trade. I think there was rumors for a while and, you can complete trades. I'm surprised how little the Penguins had to give up for the Norris Trophy winner. He had 100 points. They only had to give up, a first and a second? Then you think, okay, Pittsburgh, they're really, Kyle Dubas is coming in, and, these guys are getting older. Malkin, Crosby just celebrated his 36th birthday yesterday. They're getting older, but they need to keep trying to compete, and this is how they're doing it with Erik Karlsson. $10 million after the 1.5 retained. From San Jose, that's 13%.
Yeah, 10 on the books for the Pens going forward with Karlsson. And again, if you this is a 3-way deal. There's a lot to dive into on it. And I'm going to give Kyle Dubas a lot of credit on this one. I mean, it takes, a very creative general manager, and I think one that can work with a lot of people to pull off a deal like this. But they get Erik Karlsson, and San Jose is going to eat $1.5 million a year. So he's on the books to the Penguins for $10 million. They also get Dylan Hamaliuk, a 2026 third rounder, and Rem Pitlick from Montreal. The Sharks get the 2024 first round pick. They get Michael Granlund, and that's probably a little bit of salary relief for Pittsburgh as well. Jan Ruda goes to the Sharks, and Mike Hoffman moves from Montreal to the Sharks as well. Now, what do the Canadians get out of this? Well, they get Pittsburgh's 2025 second round pick. Jeff Petry's back as a Montreal Canadian. Casey DeSmith comes over to, be part of the goaltending group in Montreal, and Nathan Laguerre. So, it's a pretty significant trade in a lot of ways. To me, I will say this. I appreciate the aggressiveness of Dubas doing what it took to get a difference maker like Karlsson. He's got 4 years left. He still skates like the wind. Obviously, we know what he did last year. And in a lot of ways, this is support for Malkin, Crosby. These guys have, 2, 3, 4 years left in the National Hockey League. And that over 30 group just got a little bigger in Pittsburgh. But for a team that just barely missed the playoffs last year, I think it gives them a much better chance to be a playoff team. I do, however, have some reservations about what that team looks like in the playoffs, considering that I think a lot of the things that Erik Karlsson feasted on in San Jose and in the regular season, I'm not as sure many of those opportunities are there in the playoffs. And we've certainly seen the way Vegas built their team. A lot of strength and size on the blue line. That's a far cry from what Pittsburgh has right now. But that being said, you had Erik Karlsson to a team that has the legs of Crosby and Malkin, and they should be even more fun to watch next year for sure.
Yeah, I think, when you say, Vegas has strength and size, look at Colorado 2 years ago. Who was the Conn Smythe winner? It was Cale Makar, and he's not exactly the biggest guy. And Colorado won with their, they had some big guys back there like Eric
You
Johnson.
do have to be able to defend is basically my point.
Yeah, but
like Letang and Karlsson leading the way. I do wonder what that would look like going up against a team like Vegas, and we saw what they did and how much physicality and that aggressiveness was a big part of the way their blue line played and the way they won.
That's fair, and I think you can also look to how it went in San Jose when they had Karlsson and Burns, and I don't know if Karlsson was still injured or they couldn't figure out who was going to be the alpha dog. How is it going to work here on the power play? Is Karlsson taking over number one where Letang has been forever? They're going to have both of them on number one. Very interesting how that's going to work out. And for San Jose, I get, when you're a bad team, you can go and take on all these bad contracts like that. That Granlund trade was just so bad. Trading for a player who doesn't produce, who's making $5 million, and Pittsburgh was able to unload that salary. Montreal dumping Mike Hoffman's salary. I'm kind of confused about it from Montreal's perspective. I think, they came out pretty well getting a second round from Pittsburgh and Jeff Petry as well, and with 25% retained. So I should put out a poll who the winner is, but I don't think San Jose, for a guy who's a Norris Trophy winner, put up 100 points. I know he's making 11.5 total. You had to eat 13%. I don't think San Jose got a crazy haul or anything. The biggest piece they got is a first round pick that's top 10 protected.
Well, the biggest piece they got was $10 million off the books.
That's true too. Well, but they had to eat, I guess, off the books for that long because he got 5 years left, and the short term they'll eat Hoffman's 4.5 and Granlund's 5.
Is it 3 or 4? I should
confirm. Actually, I've written that part. That's a key part here of what they're going to have to do.
It's 4 more years. So yeah, it's $10 million on the books for the next 4 4 seasons, which, they just be paying a ton of money to a guy. Well, I mean, listen, I think a lot of the last season was in San Jose was just all about San Jose, and I will agree with T. Will on this one. I can't be sure, but I predict that Karlsson will score fewer points when he doesn't have an entire team single-mindedly focus on getting him points. I don't know. Maybe I'm alone on this. And listen, we all saw what they did in Winnipeg, when he got the 100. It was very much focused on him. And listen, that was a weird season for them. By the way, Jeffrey Kohut, appreciate the support. Thank you for being a WST supporter. Great to see you there. So, here's our why not question of the day for Not Autocorp over at Waverly and McGillivray. Who won the Karlsson trade? From which team do you think made out the best, considering where they were going into the weekend, where they are right now? Was it the Pittsburgh Penguins, who get the best player in the deal? Was it San Jose, who gets some of that salary cap relief, gets a first-round pick? They're clearly looking ahead to the future. Or was it Montreal, who changes a few of the deck chairs? They get rid of Mike Hoffman. They do get rid of Rem Pitlick. They get to Smith coming in. They get Jeff Petrie. They get that second-round pick. Give us your thoughts in the chat for the why not question of the day, and you can vote in it as well. We'll get to that coming up with and the thing that I'm going to ask Jeff, because as I said, Reem, this is a really interesting trade. I think it was a very difficult trade to pull off, and we always hear that, and then nothing happens. Well, you know what? It was just too difficult. There was interest in a player, but it was just too difficult to pull off with the cap. I do wonder, with a deal like this, that obviously took a lot of work behind the scenes, it took a third team to get it involved, but the fact that it was done, does that maybe put a little bit more pressure on general managers in the NHL to go that extra mile to try to find a way to get it done? Because listen, for all the trade rumors and the stuff that we hear all the time, what's the number one reason why trades don't get done? We hear, it just doesn't work within the cap. There was no way to make things work. Well, I'm not sure. Erik Karlsson at $11.5 million seemed like maybe the biggest albatross as far as it would be difficult to make, especially a trade to a team that didn't have a lot of cap space. How do you make that work? Well, Kyle Dubas and these three general managers just did. And I mean, you look at teams like Winnipeg and some others that have some assets that, obviously I think there's been discussion and a want to move on, from those assets. I do wonder if that, increases a little bit of internal pressure to maybe find a way to get things done. Certainly, I'm sure the media would love that because it gives us great things to talk about. Or maybe this will be something we talk about for a couple days and then it's forgotten until we see Erik Karlsson skating around in a Penguins jersey.
Yeah, I forgot about every move that was made at July 1, and then when the season starts, I'm like, oh right, this guy is on this team. But as far as the trade goes, they had to get creative. They had to make it work. They had to bring in another team in Montreal to, balance out all the salary because everyone is up against the cap. It's so hard to make deals. Even San Jose, after all this, their projected cap space, $4 million. Pittsburgh's projected cap space is they're over the 70,000 over the cap. Montreal is $5 million over the cap. Now there might be some LTIR stuff and guys you can move around. Does Montreal look to deal Jeff Petrie to someone else and get some more assets in the future? We'll have to wait and see.
He was good in Montreal. I mean, he was maybe his best of his career in Montreal, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, he was good in I agree. He was good in Montreal. I thought he was good in Pittsburgh. He played power play 1 when Letang was hurt. So if you had to pick a winner, I think, Pittsburgh, they're trying to hang on here, extend this Crosby-Malkin window. Are they, they missed the playoffs last year. Do they vault into cup contender status with this trade? I don't think so, but they have a shot to get in. Maybe they make some more additions, and I like what Kyle Dubas has done. As you look at some of the moves, they signed Ryan Graves long-term deal. Christian Jarry got the long-term deal. Bringing in some depth like Matt Nieto, Lars Eller, Noel Acciari.
Riley Smith for nothing.
That was a great.
What was it? A third-round pick? And it was the annual Vegas single salary dump to figure out what else they were going to do.
That was a good trade too.
Barbashev, so they got rid of Riley Smith.
Yeah, that was a good trade.
The Penguins missed the playoffs by 1 point last year. I know we're talking a lot, and I've been, hey, I'm really high on Buffalo. I think Ottawa could be in the mix. What happens with Detroit? Well, let's not forget about the Penguins that were one of the non-playoff teams. And certainly a move like this, I think, gives them a better chance of being a playoff team. I am somewhat skeptical as to whether this team makes them a little bit more ready to make a big run in the playoffs. But I'll tell you what, goals matter, and Erik Karlsson's able to create a lot of those for his team. Big question is to, first get to the playoffs, I guess, and then you can worry if those guys can handle it together as part of a group. Just quickly on San Jose. With Karlsson gone, they had, and people sort of forget about this, they had tied up so much of their core to those long-term deals. Like Mark-Edward Vlasic is 36 years old. He's got 3 more years at $7 million. Logan Couture is 34. He's got 4 more years at $8 million a year. And, Thomas Hertl, who sort of is, I think, the Aaron waiting to be the next captain of this team, has a contract that goes until the end of the 29-30 season. So those big guys are wrapped up. Granlund has 2 more years at $5 million. But, man, coming off the books next year, Kevin Labanc, Mike Hoffman, Anthony Duclair, Alexander Barabanov, Oscar Lindblom. And, when you look at that, Remo, and Hoffman's a perfect example of a guy that, will do whatever this year. But if he can have a good season and have some value at the deadline, there's a very good chance that they can recoup some picks from 1 or 2 of those players coming out at the end of the season. So I think there is, the goal of Mike Greer right now, I think is to, continue to pick up some assets, to get some more picks, to give some younger players a time, an opportunity to play so that in, the next 2 to 3 years, they're sort of turning things over. And then the Vlasic contract will be done. Couture will be done. And you'll actually have a group of players ready to really sort of transition and take over with Hertl sort of leading the way. But yeah, listen, they brought on that $10 million, like 5x2 for Michael Granlund. They did pick up some salary. The salary in Mike Hoffman as well, but they don't have a $10 million payment to Erik Karlsson. Although I'm sure if you ask many Sharks fans from last year, Karlsson was the only reason worth watching the San Jose Sharks, and now he's gone.
I had Erik Karlsson in fantasy, so I watched a lot of their games. He was so awesome to watch. Their power play was still great. Their top 5, Hertl, Couture, Karlsson, they were fun. They're a fun team. That top line. They also play, late games, and I love the late games. But the biggest thing for being an NHL GM is having flexibility and without, having these big long contracts tied up. So they're not a cup contender. Well, they don't need an Erik Karlsson, so trade him away. And you look at their picks now. They haven't really, they haven't stockpiled a ton of picks like Arizona did or St. Louis this year or Detroit, but they're on their way right now for 2024. They got 2 in the first round with their own pick and Pittsburgh's. They got a pick from New Jersey as well in round 2. And I agree. You look at all these guys pending UFAs. Like, you don't think you could trade a $3 million Anthony Duclair to a contender?
And that's why those 1-year deals are great. If you're in a situation like that, those 1-year deals make a lot of sense because, obviously the guys are there. If they really click and you want to make a longer commitment, you can talk about it. But otherwise, you're getting picks or some sort of assets at the deadline for teams that weren't able to carry those guys but want to have them for the playoffs. We'll get Jeff Hamilton's thoughts on this deal coming up and a little bit of NHL offseason talk for the Jets. We'll also get into the Bombers' big win, the massacre on Thursday night of the British Columbia Lions, the week in the Canadian Football League, and more. Just before we get to Jeff, got to give a big thanks to our friends at Vita Health Fresh Market. Looking for great prices on natural and organic supplements, beauty products, and groceries? Get on down to one of 6 Vita Health Fresh Market stores or online at myvita.ca. Of course, they've got same-day local delivery for online orders. And when you shop at Vita Health, you're supporting a great local company, family-owned and operated since 1936 with Winnipeg's largest assortment of local products too. And again, barbecue season right now here. Get down to Vita Health and stock up on some of the delicious Vita Market grass-fed bison and beef steaks, and pairs well with a sober Carpenter beer or Zevia soda. Vita Health Fresh Market, empowering people to lead healthy lives. 6 Winnipeg locations and online at myvita.ca. Wallace & Wallace are Winnipeg's fencing and overhead door specialists. You've seen them all over the city, serving residential and commercial customers since 1946, and of course just finished up as proud sponsors of the World Police and Fire Games, and have supplied all the fencing for their various sites. If you're ever having an outdoor event, a wedding, family reunion, or need a temporary fence of any kind for your property or construction site, give them a call. And of course, they're also the go-to people for Winnipeg's largest selection of overhead garage doors. 452-2700, wallacefences.com online, or pop down to their showroom on Lawson Road off of Kenniston. Fellas, how's the closet looking as we get closer to fall? If you need to up your menswear game heading into the next season, get on down to F Apparel. Custom suits beginning at $400, along with chinos, golf pants, custom shirts, both tucked and untucked styles, and an incredible selection of menswear accessories. In a wedding, talk to them about a 15% discount for all the fellas to get their suits from F for the big day. And of course, they're at 190 Smith Street downtown. You can find out more online or make an appointment at F. That's EPHapparel.com. And just before we bring in Hammer, another great summer weekend. Always a great time to pop down and see our friends Nick and Nikki at one of the 4 Nick and Nikki DQ locations, the Dairy Queen in Northgate, DQ Polo Park, DQ St. Anne's, and DQ Niverville. And hit them up on Instagram at DQ Manitoba if you want to get a custom-made ice cream or blizzard cake for an upcoming event. All right, we got a lot to talk about with Jeff Hamilton coming out over a long weekend. Hammer, what's going on, buddy? Great to have you back on the show.
Hey, Huss. Always great to start my week off with you.
Hold on a sec. Reem, it's the double talk again.
I can hear myself.
Yeah. Remis?
It's good now.
Okay, right on.
Are we good?
Yeah, we're back.
Yeah. Smooth. It was good. My week, I've been enjoying one of my week vacations off. I'm in rainy Ottawa right now. I was at the lake for a majority of the time, and now I'm back in the city and looking to take advantage of the next few days before I actually, I don't go back to work till Tuesday, but I come back home on Thursday. So I don't even know what I'm doing next weekend, but taking it day by day, enjoying some of the dog days of summer before things really ramp up, both in the CFL and NHL here.
Yeah, well, listen, I want to get to CFL and talk about the game and look ahead as well as what happened this weekend. But we were just talking about the trade on the weekend between the Sharks, the Penguins, and the Montreal Canadiens.
Mm-hmm.
Interested in your, put it this way, what was your first thought when you saw it? The fact that it was a 3-team deal, a very complicated trade, and one that obviously took a lot of work and a long time to get done.
Yeah, I mean, clearly a player like Erik Karlsson, intrigued a lot of teams given his season with a lowly San Jose Sharks club. So there was a lot of teams going after him, but it seemed like once Kyle Dubas took over in Pittsburgh, it almost felt inevitable that he was going to get Erik Karlsson to bring some energy to a team that is going to have a lot of familiarity from previous years as they continue with this regime led by Sidney Crosby, Evgeny Malkin, and Chris Letang, of course. But what an addition, right? I mean, this is a guy who's not going to be relied on necessarily to be the number one defenseman, even though he's more than equipped and capable of doing so. I also like the addition of Erik Karlsson because if one of those guys who I just mentioned, whether it's a Chris Letang goes down, or a Malkin or a Crosby, both who are getting up there in age and probably need some element of load management now in their careers, even if they go down to longer term injuries, they get the offensive burst that you get with an Erik Karlsson. So I really like it. I also like for Pittsburgh what it does to their power play. When it becomes stagnant over a few years, used to be their identity. It's struggled, particularly last season, to have a guy like Erik Karlsson quarterbacking that group. That just it starts to remember those days of Penguins dominance when much like we see with Edmonton in the last couple of years, where you don't want to put a power play unit out there. That hasn't been the case in Pittsburgh for at least a year or two. So to get Erik Karlsson back there, that's certainly an asset. It's also, as you mentioned, Huss, with the 3 teams, it's certainly a savvy look. I don't mind what Montreal did, to be to do that, or in that trade, to be honest with you. I mean, I think they're probably somewhat shocked they get a second round pick out of the whole mess. I mean, they pick up, they dump Pitlick and they dump Hoffman, two guys they probably wouldn't have made their roster out of camp this season, yet carry a decent cap hit to clear space for some of the younger guys. That's a big one. And then that's an interesting one, getting Jeff Petrie back, because that's a guy who asked to leave Montreal not too long ago, but certainly, like what Marty St. Louis was building there when he was on his way out. So that's either a piece to help shore up their right side or trade. They've already got a little bit of that salary retention. They can add a bit more to that to sweeten the pot as a trade piece. So that I like the look of it all around, to be honest with you. But certainly, I think Kyle Dubas was looking to make his mark, and this is a pretty good one as we inch towards the end of summer and towards hockey season.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sort of with you. I mean, the first thing, and it was funny. I mean, we were out fishing all day, completely off the grid.
That must have been amazing. We haven't even talked about that.
Yeah, we had I mean, an unbelievable time. I mean, Aitken's Lake, it certainly is my favorite few days of the year. Great crew with us. But I mean, we're doing our shore lunch, and, we'd been out since 8 a.m. And I said, just watch. It's the Sunday of the August long weekend. This is when we're going to get back, and we're going to turn our phones on or get to a Wi-Fi area and see that. I mean, we were talking about, for instance, my Scheifele or Hellebuck being dealt. Well, it wasn't that, but it was still a significant trade. And it did get me thinking, and Remo and I were just kicking this around. Very interested to see we'll probably never hear the honest reactions, but I'd love to know what the other GMs were thinking about this deal. Like, I think Kyle Dubas has been somewhat of a polarizing guy. Many people think that he's somewhat overrated. Many people think that he's like the genius and he's on another level.
Totally.
I'll give him
not many in between.
No, exactly. And, part of it is just being in the Toronto market. I mean, everyone's got a take about it. But I have to give him a ton of credit. I mean, it was clear that they wanted this guy. They figured, I mean, he really does fit in with the timing of when they're going to have Crosby and when they're going to have Malkin. I mean, in 5 years, this Pittsburgh Penguins team will probably look nothing like it does right now. But he's coming off a Norris Trophy season. He comes in, he adds a lot to the club that, at least in the regular season, I think will make a big difference. And, I mean, they missed the playoffs by 1 point last year. But the reason why I bring up other GMs is that I think that the amount of work, I mean, this is a really, really creative trade. And we know that the National Hockey League is, and pro sports in general, kind of a copycat industry where people see what's been done elsewhere. There's a lot of players that we've speculated, including some here in Winnipeg, where the market just hasn't been there for them. I do wonder whether this maybe, has general managers like Cheveldayoff and some of the others around maybe getting back to trying maybe some different things for it. Easy to say, but I mean, we just hear over and over, Jeff, that the biggest reason why a lot of these trades don't happen is the cap, and there's all these reasons why things can't happen. There was a million reasons why the Erik Karlsson trade couldn't happen, and yet it did.
Well, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I don't know if it necessarily puts pressure on teams. I mean, there's always going to be, especially with how late this trade feels. I mean, it kind of feels right at that deadline kind of time. I mean, a lot of players or a lot of teams already have kind of their prices, right? That, the back and forths are endless, including the Winnipeg Jets. It might seem like a quiet time, but I don't mean like right now necessarily, but over the last, months, certainly weeks, but you're having a lot of these conversations. And I wonder, this is kind of where you not only gain dance partners in the trade, but you take advantage of some of the dance partners you have. And I think that's where the savviness of a Kyle Dubas, and probably why a lot of people believe in him, is because he's got those balls to, and those relationships to pull off these kind of trades. He's got the wherewithal, to find something that he wants and then go to the lengths to get it, right? Because he believes in it. I think there's a lot of fan bases out there that would look at a trade like this, and whether they're in Winnipeg or elsewhere. I mean, every fan base wants their teams to improve, and any fan base that believes their club is a trade away from being a contender or being a playoff team wants those deals done. So perhaps there's a bit of inherent inherent pressure when it comes to seeing, when looking at a trade like this and wondering why your team isn't being, having a ton of activity. But you're right. I think it goes beyond that, though. It goes beyond, it goes into just a savviness, right? And the relationships you have around the league and an identity within your team. And, we talk instantly right now about who's going to be the winner of this trade, but we have no idea, and that it took a bit of a risk, right? Erik Karlsson, wasn't on the trash sheet necessarily, but he does come with risk. He's not a great defensive player, as we all know, and he's getting up there in age. And so I think with each team, I think there's a greater urgency with the Pittsburgh Penguins. There's a different urgency if you want to compare it to Winnipeg than what's going on in Pittsburgh, because Winnipeg might have expiring contracts, yes, but they're kind of retooling as we go here. Whereas Pittsburgh, it's pretty much run by Sidney Crosby, and in a positive way, not in a negative way. That a lot of the decision making, a lot of the influence comes from those veteran players, and they need to make a move now. So the pressure, I believe, was more so on a Kyle Dubas than a Kevin Cheveldayoff, even though you can make the argument that Kevin Cheveldayoff is dancing with two obviously important assets. We've talked about this for weeks. I just think the Winnipeg Jets aren't necessarily as eager to switch things up and get necessary, to get that value that many fans perceive out of a Connor Hellebuyck or a Mark Scheifele in return, and are more interested on seeing what the fruits of their labor from, the Pierre-Luc Dubois trade and other moves can have for this season to get back on track. And I think that's kind of why we're looking at Winnipeg here and wondering, well, is there going to be any action? Is there going to be, there must be something. I think as we get deeper here in August, that's becoming a little bit less and less. And certainly, you can talk about pressure, but this is something that Kevin Cheveldayoff has always kind of balked at, right? Any kind of outside pressure, it's been all internal for this group.
Yeah, well, I mean, listen, I think I was almost referring to internal pressure, like realizing that there is these situations that kind of haven't been resolved, and, obviously are going to have different effects if players are with you, not knowing whether they're going to be there. All of those things that come in. And this is not unique to Chevy, but a lot of the other guys, Conroy in Calgary, that has Lindholm. When you're looking at, where they are, what they're hoping to do for their team, and then seeing a deal that's put together like this, that's very unconventional and not, what we've really seen in recent times. There's been a few third-party deals but it's just a team getting a pick to maybe eat up a little bit of cap space or something like that. There's multiple players going all over. And, I know we've talked about this before, and things change. I get it. But going into the draft, if you talk to people that, had a bit of a line into the Winnipeg Jets, yes, they were talking about all those players, but some of the things that had been discussed reportedly, were a lot bigger than trading one guy. We had been talking about, a real significant shakeup. Now, again, that was before Pierre-Luc Dubois was dealt. And, when you bring back three players for one, it does fundamentally change sort of, what you're looking at. But I think of those players, and then I look at a trade like this and see the other defensemen and goalies that were moved in. And, I wouldn't be surprised if maybe there's a little bit back to the drawing board on some of these things at this point, at a time where, frankly, normally deals like this are not being made.
Well, that's the beauty of all the big trades. Every team is, as you mentioned, internally, externally, there's a ripple effect through every organization. And you're definitely looking at an East that goes, oh, great, Erik Karlsson's now in our conference. How are we now going to, how do we stack up against a team like Pittsburgh, right? The Metro is all of a sudden looking at their teams and internal rosters. I just harken back to Winnipeg, because I think it's less of a roster pressure, if you will, and more of a production pressure. I think all the pressure going into this season is less about, getting those assets and returns. I know fans aren't going to like that, getting the returns on those big assets, and it's more about finding that groove, right? And it's not quite running it back, because there's certainly some significant changes, as we saw. Blake Wheeler no longer on the team, obviously Pierre-Luc Dubois, and the pieces that have come back and where they'll fit in the roster. It's going to be a different looking team, but I think it's going to have a ton of the same pieces, and including a Connor Hellebuyck, including, Mark Scheifele. And I think that's where the internal pressure lies. I think it's less about, oh my goodness, these guys are on expiring deals. What can we get back so we can move into the future as much as it is the present, and what kind of, again, the mojo that needs to get back into this team, into this city, around a club that has had high expectations the last couple of years and has fallen short. This is kind of their last opportunity before they might have to go into, a rebuild or a retool that might take a year or two, being out of the playoffs. I think they look at this roster and go, this is a team that can compete, with the Vegas Golden Knights. Whether you agree with that or not is irrelevant. I think that's what the club is honestly thinking with this group, and why they're more than hesitant to trade a Connor Hellebuck or a Mark Scheifele.
Let me hit you with something that a couple of the guys hit me with while we were away on the weekend. And Remo, I'll be interested in your numbers on this. They said, okay, give me your percentage predictions as to whether, and we can go with, it was specifically asked about Scheifele, but to me, I'm not sure that the Connor Hellebuck number is that different. Uh-huh. What's the percentage that he'll be traded before the opening day of the season? What's the potential of the player being traded before the Christmas break? Like, when you're not allowed to trade around Christmas time.
Okay.
What's the percentage that the player is dealt at the deadline? What's the percentage that the player is on the Winnipeg Jets after the trade deadline and is through the playoffs and then, is an unrestricted free agent? And the way I'm at it right now, I figured it's 20% before game one of the season, 25% in the first 2.5 months of the season before that Christmas trade embargo, 40% at the deadline, and 15% no trade. And I was
so 15%. Sorry, you said 15% wasn't no trade. 15% was that they remain with the Winnipeg Jets next season. So extension.
No,
make it through the year and then figure out what happens in the summer.
15% are not traded this year by the Winnipeg Jets. So basically make it through the deadline without being traded.
Then why are your other numbers not higher? So you have a low mark that they're going to get traded at all.
I have 85%.
Right at the end. But if you have all the seasons, so you're telling me that when are they going to trade them? When do you think they're going to trade them then?
Well, I mean, my 40% is the biggest number.
Well, that's what I mean. So you have the 85% when you mark off your 15, but you have a very low percentage that they're going to be traded into game one or before game one. Yeah. You have an equally low percentage that they're going to be traded by that Christmas break, and then you're talking 40% by the deadline. So
yeah, like 40, I'd say. I mean, again, we're just adding this up, but 20 before the season, before game one, 25% at some point in the first 2.5 months of the season. So total of that is 45. So I guess if you said, is it more likely that these players are traded at any point before Christmas? Is 45%. 40% is at the deadline. I still think that it's likely that both of these players are traded.
Yeah, no, I hear you.
85 is the total, and and the 15%, not something that I think makes sense without extensions. But again, I mean, let's just say the team plays out of their mind, and you're contending for the top of the division. I've talked about this for a better part of the last month. It makes it very, very tough to trade those players. And listen, there'll be people that would understand it. I would be one of them. But I mean, the biggest challenge, I think, is, what that does to your team. That's worked their asses off for 55 games and gets them into a position where they feel like they've got as good a chance as any. How do you do that? So again, 20, 25, 40, 15. Do you have, is there one of those areas that you think is a lot more likely, or I'm over or underestimating them?
Okay, so you have to add up, Kate, because I was just taking my overall percentages, yes and no for each moment. If you're adding all those things up and then they equal 100, that's a little bit of trouble. I think it's because I almost feel like I don't want to do it in the way you're doing it. Here's what I think is going to happen. Let me just speak and see if this makes sense. So I think there's about a 20 to 25% chance that one or either gets traded before game one. I don't think it's a good chance.
Okay,
I just don't think it's a good chance.
Deadline. We're on the same.
Okay, so then when you take in the Christmas one, I think with the roster, assuming everything goes well, like with the the unit they have, I think there's a 0% chance that they get traded before the Christmas break. One based on performance, because I just don't think that, I think they're going to be okay in the sense that they might prove to be a better working team, cohesive team. The locker room might be, but all those things, the benefits. There's also a lot of moving pieces, so who knows? But I do think they'll be a pretty good club to start the year, at least competitive. And I also don't think that the Winnipeg Jets organization will be looking for trades, November, December. Like, I just don't think that's going to be in their DNA. I just don't think they're
I do.
Okay.
And the reason for that is that, like, the situation hasn't changed with these expiring contracts.
No,
and I
absolutely.
think we all agreed that they were hoping to maybe get something done right now. Like, I don't think they've done a 180 with thinking that, if they get the right offer, that they're going to make a deal. And to be honest, I think, and this is the reason why I have it at 25% in that first little bit. Guys will get hurt. Like, the situations will open up around the league that might make it a little easier to be done. But I think Kevin Cheveldayoff absolutely knows that the longer this goes, it really puts him in a really, really difficult situation where, do you do the right thing for the big picture, the long term? Is that punting on the season? How that responds within your other... Like, I think that if they do it earlier, it's easier for them to react going forward. But, and as I said, I think the most likely is being done in and around the deadline. But as I said, depending on what happens with the team, like, let's just say that I'm going to stick with my 20 and 25 numbers up to Christmas. If all of a sudden this team is playing way beyond expectations, which they did last year in the first half of the year, I think that 40% shrinks and the 15% where they don't get traded gets up. And I'm not sure that they really would want to be in that situation. Like, what's going to change? They know about Mark Scheifele. They know about Connor Hellebuck. They know exactly what they have. They know their situations of extension possibilities, whether they've thought about that or not. So to me, I think a trade earlier in the season is probably more palatable for them because it's not done in a gun to your head decision, basically, where you're keeping them and letting them walk for nothing, but at the same time potentially blowing up the team.
So I'm comfortable with my numbers now. So 20%, I'm going to change 0 to 10% before Christmas, but I do think it's more of a 0%, but 10's pretty close to that. 20% at the trade deadline, because the fact of the matter is, if you go with these two players into the regular season, you're not looking. The Jets are hoping for the best. They're hoping that it might not be ideal for fans as far as, again, that return. But the Jets, if they're going into this season, and it seems like they are with these two players, they want to maximize the season. They're not looking to deal them at the trade deadline. It's just not in this team's DNA, especially if they're doing well. Of course, if they're doing well, they're not being traded. So I'll do the 20, 10, and then I'll do 20% at the trade deadline, because the only way that the trade deadline, looking at the history of this club, I think this team would look at it and go, look, we're 2-3 points out of a playoff spot, rounding the corner of the trade deadline, and still be adverse to not making a trade. And maybe they would be, you'd hope that they would be, but I just feel that gap is so wide for the Winnipeg Jets not to make a move that they'd have to be completely out of the playoff picture and might even be discussing trades by the earlier one. I just don't see it happening. So I guess that leaves me with 50% that they get through the season. But if I'm being totally honest, the way it goes, it feels more like 20-0-0-80, because unless they trade these two players or one of these players, I see them as a legitimate playoff team potential, right? And if that plays out, there would be no reason to trade them in the next two opportunities, and that would take them to the end of the year. So I feel like the moves need to be made now or yesterday.
But you think that changes that much? Like, if they would do it now, if they had a good an offer that made sense for them right now in August, I mean, do you think the minute we start playing hockey games, that number goes down? I would say it goes the other way, because I think things might happen around the league that would make that more likely. Like, I don't think that they go from being very interested in moving one or both of these players to getting them back here to Winnipeg and then say, okay,
that's the thing. They're
out.
Clearly not very interested in moving these guys, because they're very interested in getting a even if not better return, right? They're not looking to sell. We talked about the,
they want to make a good trade. Yeah.
Exactly. And so I don't think it's a matter of being very interested, because I think they were very interested in moving on from Blake Wheeler, so they made it happen one way or another. If they were very interested in trading either of those guys, I think they would make it happen one way or the other. I think that this team is looking to again get into that, that one last year, if you will, of good team, good vibes. Maybe it's different, right? Like I said, there's a lot of similar, a lot of familiar pieces on the roster, but there's also a handful that have gone. Some, you would argue, maybe some of the personality stuff, right? So maybe they want to see what happens. And I guess it's not so much that I disagree with your logic, Huss. Of course, it becomes more, as time ticks on, becomes more imperative that they at least, at the very least, consider moving these players or risk losing them for nothing. That pressure is going to exist all season long. I guess where I, not necessarily differ, where I put my logic behind is that the Jets have a pretty decent roster right now, and, utilized the right way and under Rick Bowness in his second season, and with a goalie like Connor Hellebuyck in net and a player like Mark Scheifele, who is coming off a 42-goal season along with the other pieces they have, this could be a good team. And so if they become a good team, I just think all that other consideration when it comes to trades is off the table and won't even be explored by the Winnipeg Jets, because otherwise, why else would you go into a season with these two guys? And why would you want to shake it up if it was going well?
Yeah. Well, I mean, listen, I don't know if they're going to find out anything new. And I will remind everyone that everything in the first half of the season seemed hunky-dory around this club. And then, unfortunately, in the second half of the year, it regressed to some things that we'd seen in the past. And specifically talking about the Scheifele thing, Scheifele seemed to be in good spirits, was scoring a ton of goals early on. And by the end of the year, he was being benched, he was being moved to left wing, and then we got into this. So, and Travis does make a good point. This team also traded Patrik Laine after he was the best player on the ice in the first game of the season, and the last thing we saw him do was score the OT winner against Calgary, and it was then moved after that game.
Oh, that's a good argument. If they have the equivalent of a 23-year-old centerman coming the other way who's also not happy with their team and believes that they can keep him, for the future and sign him to a long-term deal, including having his father be part of your team's staff. Yeah, that sounds like an awesome opportunity. Patrik Laine was on the trading block for a while. That was a piece that falls into the category of, if they were very interested in doing it, in which they were very interested in dealing Patrik Laine, they go and do what they had to, or they did what they had to do to get that done. I just don't see that urgency with either of Connor Hellebuyck and Mark Scheifele, who, as we know, it's not a level of importance to a club. We know how important Patrik Laine is, but we also understand the standing that those two players have that Patrik Laine clearly didn't have within the locker room. So there was an interest on both sides to get it done. I don't think we have that situation here with Mark Scheifele and Connor Hellebuyck, who are necessarily asking for a trade, right? I think they're not, begging for an extension, because I don't think those two players know what the future looks like in this organization. It'll be very interesting, right? Because you'd have to think at the very least that, these two guys would be interested in signing a long-term extension under the right circumstances for their, respective camp. And I look at Connor Hellebuyck, who, as we've talked about in recent weeks, is just seems like he's not getting that $8-9 million long-term deal anywhere else, especially as the philosophy in how to use your goaltending has changed. We look at the Vegas Golden Knights. He doesn't seem like Connor Hellebuyck, doesn't seem like in an ideal situation to sign a long-term deal elsewhere. And Mark Scheifele to a similar degree, right? He's getting up there in age. His stock is not rising. Is he in the market for a, max contract, max deal elsewhere? Probably not. So, I think there's probably some chance here that, while it seems unlikely, who knows what the next year could have. And that's why this year is going to be so fascinating. It's because there's so many questions and so few answers that we'll probably get a better idea of those some answers to some of those questions, like whether or not the team will be interested in trading them in December. Because if this team falls off a cliff right away, I mean, where else can this club go? Where else can Kevin Cheveldayoff look to do beyond trading? Because now it's hurting the current situation. And if that becomes the case early on the season, like if they just don't gel, or some of that stuff that was lingering on at the end of last season lingers into this season, it's a slow start, then all our percentages change. Because if that happens, if they do come out of the gate not playing well, then I think you're looking for opportunities, and teams are looking for opportunities to take players who might be at an affordable price for one season or whatever.
Oh yeah, like if the Jets start, and you are right. I mean, this is sort of our August conversation. These are our numbers for the different scenarios, but nothing's going to affect this more than what happens on the ice. And I mean, if the team starts 13-2, we won't be talking about it. And if the team starts 5-10, there'll be a segment on SportsCenter and on Sportsnet talking about, our first trade bait board of the year is out, and once again, the Jets are at the top of the list with those players. Listen, I want to talk Bombers, but I guess this comes down to specifically Scheifele. To me, the Hellebuck is more about contract and all those things. Mm-hmm. But when you think about the way these last two seasons have ended, when it comes to Mark Scheifele, I mean, what happened with Dave Lowry, the exit interviews that year were, it was, I need to find out what's going on here for my situation. You do the right thing. And then, of course, what happened last year with with where he was playing, everything. What do you think would need to happen with Mark coming into camp this year and playing at the beginning of into the season that would make the Winnipeg Jets eager to try to feel good enough about the situation that they would maybe run it back and try and give him an extension?
Oh, good question.
Because I think because of what's happened, I mean, and part of the reason why we've heard so much about Scheifele being traded is that I think that is highly, highly unlikely. I think things would need to be significantly different with the player, certainly the relationship with the coach. I mean, we'll get into this at camp, but I mean, if he's back, considering the way the season ended, I'm really interested to see how things go with he and Rick Bowness right off the bat. But I mean, to get to that point where we're even talking about that as a reality, what do you think needs to happen this year with Mark in the final year of his contract?
Yeah, it's a great question, because I started off by saying I don't know, because right now I think what the Jets are looking like, I think what the Jets are looking for and what Mark Scheifele's stock is currently at aren't aligning as far as a return. I think the Jets have a lot of respect for Mark Scheifele, believe he can do a lot of damage in this league, still view him as a up there as a top end centerman, as a number one centerman on a team. And so that those don't grow on trees. So you're not just dumping a guy off because, he might have issues in the locker room or with his own attitude, right? And how he handles things. He's still a very talented player, and talent wins out. What would have to happen? It's hard to say, because if Mark Scheifele is lighting the scoring sheet up and is on pace to say eclipse 50 goals, well, his stock rises, but then his stock rises for the Winnipeg Jets. So would he be that appetizing piece to another team that looks at a guy and goes, wow, he's doing it again, we will really up our price? Or do the Winnipeg Jets look at one season and is it enough? And I think, Huss, we were talking about this last off season. Is that what would it take to sign Mark Scheifele to a long-term deal last year because of what we saw the year before that? And then, because that's when the contract talks can start. And, I think we had that conversation where it was like, I don't know what you can do in a single year. I don't know what you can do in one season to maybe to have the Jets want to commit what I think would have to be at least a 5-6 plus year, commitment. Because I don't think we're talking at 8 years here. You know what I mean? I don't think that's on the table or as part of the conversation. But I think if you look at an extension with Mark Scheifele, you might be looking at the 5-year deal if you start looking at other players. But what would have to happen there is, it's an interesting question. And to be honest with you, I don't know what, if anything, needs mending amongst Rick Bowness and Mark Scheifele. I mean, Rick Bowness did him no favors last season. You'll know Mark Scheifele and his camp know the damage that Rick Bowness did at the end of the year to his stock, and really throughout the year calling out the top end players. I don't know what would have to go into those conversations to extend. It would have to be a conversation among coaches. Is Rick Bowness the future beyond next season? There's a lot of things that would have to be, and it's not just the Winnipeg Jets asking these questions. It's Mark Scheifele asking these questions, the same questions he was asking last offseason when people were curious about his future with the Winnipeg Jets. So, I don't know what would have to happen. I think for him to have to sign a long-term extension, after this season, I think he'd have to be playing extremely well, which I think you'll get a really, really motivated Mark Scheifele. You'll probably have to view him as, future leadership guy. Like I think really it comes down to he'll have to just play well on the ice, and the rest will take care of itself. If he's willing to sign a fair deal with Winnipeg, and Winnipeg believes he's part of their plans and can fit in, that really important center spot, then maybe it does become a conversation, or maybe he plays well and he's bait at the trade deadline because the Winnipeg Jets aren't doing well, or maybe he plays well or maybe they don't play well and Mark Scheifele doesn't play well and it's an obvious choice. I think, again, it's hard to answer that question because you don't know all the factors at play and we can't predict the future here. So as of right now, it looks like the Winnipeg Jets are certainly interested in having him around and being a significant part of this team, this changing team, and hopefully for, and what they hope a playoff team. So, it's a good question. It's just a hard question to answer because there's probably lots of things at play here over the next
The only thing I'll add to that, because I think you make some good points. We've talked a lot about this team and this organization needing a culture change. And I've said for a long time, we're never getting to Jets 3.0. And this was like 2 years ago until Maurice is no longer the head coach and Wheeler and Scheifele. Now, Maurice has been gone. Mm-hmm. We've seen what's happened. They made the difficult and expensive decision to move on from Blake Wheeler. But just because those things have happened, I think it's completely revisionist history to sort of go forward as if Mark wasn't a big part of that. And to me, that's a big part of why I have thought that move needed to be made for a while. And again, to me, I think it's buying in, it's being that sort of a teammate. It is being, and it's tough to ask a guy to completely change after 7 years, doing what he's been doing. And I personally don't expect that happens.
It's foolish to think that someone can. So it's
yes. So that is why there is. Hey, listen, that game on Thursday night, I will say we nailed it. Shout out to everyone that rode with us on the Lock Shop Partner Parlay. We got you some beer money for the weekend. Luckily kept that Bomber game off of it. I didn't want to touch the point spread because I liked the Bombers to win, but I thought 6 was a big number. And I really thought this was going to be an incredible battle of two defenses. I thought this would be sort of like 21-17 back and forth. This was, haymaker after haymaker from Zach Collaros, completely Vantage. Exposing that BC defense. The 50 burger was nice, but an all-cap statement game by the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. And I know they'd said, this is just another game, or most guys did. That wasn't. What were your big takeaways from what the Bombers did to the British Columbia Lions Thursday night?
Oh, so many things. I wrote 5 of them, in my post-game column, as I do every week. And I think certainly starts off by just the offensive outburst. This offense, we know how good they are under Zach Collaros. We know how good Zach Collaros is in this league. But after a hot start, they averaged more than 40 points for the first 2 games. They kind of cooled down. I know they had put up 28 points in the last 2 games part of this one, but it wasn't that dominating performance that we've just kind of been waiting to see from the Bombers. And I don't think a lot of people, myself included, were necessarily thinking that was going to happen against a very, very, and I hate to call them potentially historic, because those numbers are so weird to say after 8-9 games, because there's still so much season to go. But they were on an historic pace for a lot of different categories: points against, offensive touchdowns against. Just consider that they had allowed 5 offensive touchdowns through 7 games, and then the Bombers put up 6 TDs on them. That more than doubled their, for those aren't good at math, that more than doubled their touchdowns against. So I thought it was vintage Zach Collaros. Some of those passes, credit certainly to Buck Pierce for clearly seen some wrinkles in that defense and taking advantage of those explosion plays. Because whether you're the BC Lions, the Bombers, or any other defense, what the DC will tell you is we just don't want the top blown off, and the top got blown off twice in the first 3-4 minutes by 96 seconds that the offense had the ball. They were all of a sudden looking at a 14-0 edge. So I just thought it was vintage back there. I thought that pass to Nick Dembski, it was the shortest of the 3 bombs, but I thought it was the nicest, just lobbing that in there over the shoulder. And Nick Dembski has just become known for that. That's got to be one of the toughest plays to make as a receiver, is the over the throw catch. And Nick Dembski makes it look as easy as anybody in the CFL right now. And so certainly that I've ignored him. I've ignored this name because I think he deserves an entire section to himself. But Kenny Lawler and his addition to the offense, I mean, give him one game to knock the rust off, and you got 7 receptions for 93, 94 yards, whatever it was. And then the guy comes out the next week and starts talking about being Mr. 2000. And of course, I'm rolling my eyes at this claim. I'm loving it because and Kenny Lawler, as a side note, was the one guy I finally got to admit it was a statement game in the locker room afterward. I think he was attempt number 6 or 7. I should have just gone to him immediately. But just what he brings to this offense is just so dynamic, his abilities. And now looking at 2,000 yards in the 12 games he's going to be able to play this year doesn't seem all that crazy. And he just brings a whole other level to this offense, and he opens up space for a Dalton Schoen who has got it's weird to even say, has got a little bit of criticism this year, despite it being on pace for better numbers than he was last season, just because he's dropped a couple balls. I mean, he was back at it, but Kenny Lawler just, again, I think he was the missing piece last season. They tried to get him at the trade deadline. I think he would have made all the difference against Toronto. And really, whether you're scoring 50 points or you're just moving the chains, Kenny Lawler is a guy who's going to catch the ball more often than not. He's going to help you move the chains. He's going to give the defense of this team a real opportunity to do what they do best, and that's create, game-changing plays. And they can only do that when they can get off the field, and they can only get off the field when the offense can stay on the field. And so I just think with Kenny Lawler, he's just one player, but he just brings such an important wrinkle to this team. Just dominated. Then the defense, man. The defense just do what they do. Quietly went about their business. Again, got off the field, so we're able to make plays, have their rest, and it was just a full complimentary beatdown by the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. And I think it silences a lot of the critics who might be calling them too old. Not too old in that game. That's for sure.
And while we're there, I mean, let's talk about the offensive line. I mean, that was the one element I thought of this team that was being was a little bit maligned. And listen, they'd had some games where they weren't their normal. I mean, listen, they're victims of their own success, but when you play at that level for so long, people expect that. And certainly in the BC game, we didn't see that. This was a masterpiece. I mean, Zach Collaros was not in trouble. It was night and day to what we saw earlier. Those guys must have had big smiles on their faces in the room afterwards, I'd imagine. I'm not sure if there was an element of "I told you so," but I'm sure they were feeling it if they didn't say it.
Yeah, so they weren't saying it. So, trying to say statement game, whatever, any adjective that sounded juicy, no one was going to it. And I went to all of them for the most part. But, I think that's just what they're not saying. I mean, what they're saying inside is this is a prideful group. It's they hear they've heard the whispers and then some of the nots, the louder comments about their age. And, they did give up 7 sacks. It wasn't like the criticism wasn't warranted after that week 3 loss. And it wasn't the greatest games for Stanley Bryan and Jamarcus Hardrick, 2 players that are, Bryan, in particular, considered arguably the best, offensive lineman in the game, American or Canadian. And so, I think this was a prove it to themselves. And I think that's the one thing that they'll never say out loud, but is truly what they're doing is just proving it to one another, right? We hear about that mantra with head coach Mike O'Shea, just play for the guy beside you. And we know how much of a family atmosphere the Bombers are. And we know how the offensive line has really been the identity of the entire team. I think it was more proving it to themselves that was a hiccup, and having that kind of response game on what was an incredibly beautiful night at IG Field in front of a fan base that has become used to seeing performances like that and got a bit of a taste or a return that, the Bombers aren't quite slowing down just yet. And certainly a reminder to the rest of the league that the Grey Cup runs through Winnipeg.
Yeah, well, and I certainly think that we'll be seeing a little bit of a shakeup on all those CFL power rankings that come out on Tuesday or Wednesday of every week because, the Bombers let everybody know what was up, when their matchup against the Lions. And then, of course, Toronto Argonauts took one on the chin in a very lean offensive performance against the Calgary Stampeders. Calgary and Saskatchewan, both with big wins, and maybe just want to touch on those as well as that wild game between Ottawa and Saskatchewan that had a little bit of everything, especially in that final few minutes.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, it looked, those were two massive wins, right? Because it was premature for sure, but we were already starting to kind of talk about the potential of an Eastern team swapping over to the West because it just looked like Calgary and Saskatchewan were not going to find it. So for them, for Calgary to get a big win against a good Toronto team, that was massive. And that win improved them to 3-5. So it's not like things are going, all that well in Stampsville, but a good victory. And then, of course, the Rough Riders also trending the wrong way, losing 3 of the last 4, 2 straight or whatever it was. It might have been 3 straight by then. It seemed like they haven't been able to turn it around. And Mason Fine, I thought, played okay just to be able to squeak out that win against a team like the Ottawa Redblacks, who are threatening to be maybe a crossover team if the West continues to play out the way it's played out. So it's made for a very interesting CFL in general. I'm still convinced we're looking at a 3-team league here. In the same kind of respect I would have had for the Bombers after that loss in week 3. I picture the BC Lions being just fine moving forward. It will be interesting about their quarterback situation. Vernon Adams is on the mend and is said to come back, I think, this week. And Dane Evans apparently was available for the second half. I don't know why you wouldn't put a guy like that. I mean, I guess the score was getting out of hand, but there was no way this team was winning with Dom Davis behind center. So pretty much given up at that point. But I just, I look at the other teams in the league, and it's just a weird, mushy middle of these teams that haven't quite figured it out. And the Saskatchewans, even Montreal, even though they got another win, but Hamilton, the Elks are in a whole other tier of their own, obviously. And, we'll see what happens here this week when the Bombers come into town. But it's just been a weird CFL season, but that always makes for an enjoyable one. And we'll see how these things play out, but at least there's a little bit more balance in the standings, even if we are seeing some teams at the top, move away from the rest of the group.
Yeah, just 3 games in the league this week, but everybody in the West going at it. And we'll get to these lines in a minute, but the Bombers have opened as 12.5-point favorites in Edmonton against the Elks. Alouettes in Saskatchewan on Saturday, and then on Friday night, and then the Saturday game will probably be a pretty angry British Columbia team going into Calgary after their big win. And I guess we'll wait to see what we get out of the Argos after another bye week. Hammer, always great having you on the program, and enjoy a little bit more R&R. Hit them straight on the golf course, and we'll look forward to seeing you when you get back to the city.
Will do, my friend. Always a pleasure doing this, and shout out to the listeners. You guys make the show. We'll see you again next week.
Right on, dude. There it is. Jeff Hamilton of the Winnipeg Free Press. Tons of great Bomber coverage in the Freep, and you can also follow him on Twitter at Jeff K. Hamilton. All right, we're hoping to head out to Montreal with our pal Moe Khan. Haven't seen Mo yet, but listen, we do have a lot to get to. Speaking of those lines and whatnot coming out of the weekend. But listen, Bombers on the road for this week, but when they're back home, you know what game day means. That means get there 2 hours early and take in the Princess Auto tailgate zone outside of IG Field. Of course, Princess Auto, proud sponsors of the Bombers and Winnipeg Sports Talk, and the place where you'll find the best deals on the most unique assortment of tools and equipment around. Everything you need to complete the projects on your list or start something new at Princess Auto. 2 Winnipeg locations, Panet Road, Portage Avenue West, and you can always shop online 24/7, 365 at princessauto.com. Our friends at Consolidated Supply have had a real busy summer. Gino, Spicy, Joe and the gang. A lot of hands and a lot of different things because there's so many different things. Consolidated Supply can help you with what you've got going on this summer. They are the leaders in irrigation systems. Been working with the golf industry for decades here in Manitoba. So if you want to get things extra green or need to irrigate some part of your property, they're your first choice for that. Also have great options for artificial turf if you want to maybe put that dream putting green in the backyard. And of course, golf carts, new and used, is the exclusive club car dealer in Manitoba. But Consolidated Supply has some other great options for your property, including hot tubs and amazing outdoor kitchen options. And of course, they are the leaders in small engine parts and repair. Pop by and see them. Consolidated Supply at their showroom, open to the public, 1395 Niagara Road East, or find out more online at cte.ca. I saw the Royal Gang in chat right now. I am just thinking, I'm so excited about NFL season coming up. We had the Hall of Fame game last Thursday. Preseason is on this week. And I know there's a ton of new NFL merchandise coming in by the day at Royal Sports. The unbeaten superstore when it comes to the best fan gear. Tons of great Bomber gear, lots of Jets gear ready for the upcoming new season, soccer from around the world. But as we try and max out the rest of this summer, don't forget about soccer, softball, baseball, tennis, disc golf, bikes, and so much more, not to mention Winnipeg's biggest hockey selection. Royal Sports, your local sports superstore, 750 Pembina Highway. And follow them on Instagram at Royal Sports Pembina for the latest merchandise drops and sale information. As far as tonight goes, Blue Jays back in action against the Guardians. Nice start yesterday for my guy, the big Korean, Hyunjin Ryu. Big win for the Jays to get off on a winning foot against the Guardians. They'll go back at it tonight. And again, if you're looking for a great spot to watch the Blue Jays tonight, and of course the Bomber game in Edmonton on Thursday, it's got to be BP, right? I mean, best lounges in town for watching the games, big sound, big screens, big beers with those delicious ice-cold schooners, and don't forget the world-famous Boston's wings, gourmet pizzas, and all the great new stuff, including the beef antojitos on the BP feature menu. Hey, if you're staying at home, you can always order online at bostonpizza.com. All right, hoping to have Moe Khan jump in a minute, but Remo, get in here, and I'm interested in your thoughts on that percentage question Jeff and I kicked around. You know, you need to have the numbers add up to 100%, and we'll maybe focus on Scheifele, but if you got a different answer for Hellebuck, go nuts. Percentage that they'll be traded before game one of the season? If it's not then, between game one and Christmas? If it's not then, between New Year's and the trade deadline? And the fourth option is no trade.
Does no trade mean they re-sign? Is there a re-sign option? I don't know.
Well, yeah.
This is tough. I could see for Scheifele like a line A scenario. Maybe someone has an injury and they do it. I think as the season goes on and your team's playing well, it's going to get hard to trade them, especially if they're on the bubble. I don't know if they have it in them to do like a St. Louis Blues when you're hovering around the playoff line to trade guys who mean so much to the team. But if Hellebuck has made it clear, and the reports are that he's not going to re-sign, you do have to trade him and say, hey, you know what, we're going to go with Brossoit. I think that's an easier trade to make. I mean, I don't want to say it's easy to replace Hellebuck, but you can plug in, Brossoit, and maybe a guy gets hot in the playoffs. They don't really have any other center. Like, we don't even know who the second line center is. If you trade Mark Scheifele, that leaves a very, very big hole in the roster. And it just seems like more and more to me, these teams, Scheifele and the Jets are a match. I find it hard. I don't know who was going to sign him. I think they would offer him more than other teams would. I don't know. I don't know if I can name it. You guys kind of lost me with all these numbers thrown at me.
It is somewhat concentrated.
I need to pull out a calculator. Confusing. While I was listening, to be like, are these percentages adding up to 100?
My numbers were accurate. Accurate.
That's good
20,
to know.
25, 40, which adds up to 85, and then 15 would be, no trade.
I do think there is a small chance that they would lose them for lose one of them for nothing and just eat it and say, you know what, we had them, we drafted them, we had them for how many years, 7 years. Look, we're trying to make the playoffs. We want that sweet playoff revenue. We think our team has a shot here. I do think one of them they keep, maybe one of them they trade. Maybe they go into the offseason and try to compete, and Mark Scheifele looks around and says, you know what, what is it? I love Winnipeg. It's all I know. What was his line after, not the most recent season, but the season before? And he's evaluated and says, you know what, it is a good fit here for him. Because if he goes, who's their top center? Do they even have one? Like, I think he's harder. As good as Hellebuyck is, I think it's harder for them to replace Scheifele than a Hellebuyck, and that seems
then
why
have we been hearing about him being traded all winter?
That seems like a dumb thing to say. Who, about Scheifele?
Yeah,
because he's got an expiring contract and he doesn't want to re-sign. I don't know. Is that they don't think they can re-sign him, or they think it's time to move on? Yeah,
exactly. So,
but you got to think. But I don't know. Then who are they going to have? Who's going to be their top center?
That is the question that is not answered right now. And I mean, I totally get that, and it is a big issue. A lot of it, I think, depends on how realistic this team thinks that it has a chance to win. And that is why, as much as it's a fun August conversation, and listen, there's not going to be any game points, and we started off with talking about the chances that one or both of those players are dealt before the start of the season. The minute the season gets going, everything is in flux, both with the situation here in Winnipeg as well as the situations elsewhere around the league. So that is going to be something that I think. Because, I mean, listen, if the team does not start well and is struggling and is under 500 in the first couple months, I think that number of an earlier trade shoots up. Obviously, if the team does well and wins a lot of hockey games and is in a playoff spot and looks like they can compete, I think it significantly dents those numbers as to where. And, you make a good point. And, I mean, I'll say this. Having a player like Scheifele come back and be productive and, and hopefully be, a real positive part of the club would be great. And I don't think, part of the reason why we focus so much on getting assets for these guys on expiring contracts is because this is the Winnipeg Jets we're talking about. Very difficult to add players of that level through free agency. But at the same time, if you told me that the Jets were going to sign a player or were going to draft a player, sign him to an ELC, sign him to an 8-year extension, and would have that sort of a run, and at the end would go elsewhere in free agency, you could absolutely live with that. And I'll include Hellebuyck in that same thing. It's just that how do you replace those guys going forward, and what's the opportunity cost to doing that? And that's why it gives us lots of fun conversations on this program that probably aren't going away anytime soon, as we got a couple months still to go before the beginning of the season. What did you think, just back to the CFL for a minute, Reem, what did you think about the action on the weekend? I know you were quite enthralled by the end of that Ottawa-Saskatchewan game.
Yeah, Ottawa's been in some wild finishes. I'll give you my CFL. I guess Chad Kelly got injured. That's big for Toronto. And if you're making if you're adjusting your power rankings right now, I'm putting the Bombers back at the top. I think they were number 3 behind Toronto and BC, but Toronto takes a step back. We don't know about Chad Kelly. BC, they looked human against the Bombers after dominating the Bombers. So that, rematch will be very solid. Calgary is very Jekyll and Hyde. You don't know, sometimes Mayer looks very good, sometimes he's not so good, but that's an impressive and much needed desperate team that needed a win. Montreal really surprised me with the second half comeback against Hamilton, and Hamilton responding by mutually agreeing to part ways with their OC and bringing Scott Milanovich in. But this Saskatchewan, I don't think Saskatchewan's very good, but here they are 4-4, and Ottawa's 3-5, but they should be 5-3. They really blew it on the final drive of their last 2 games Last week, they had a chance to tie, and what they hand to Litre instead of letting their quarterback, throw it.
Nothing like that fullback dive.
Yeah, the fullback. Yeah, he got stuffed. And then last week again, Saskatchewan gives them a gift by going for it from their own 20 on 3rd and 1, and they can't get it. And I just thought there was too much time left to, if they get the first down and then get stopped, I think Ottawa still gets the ball back with time. So I didn't think that was the right call, but I get it. We've seen Bill Belichick do that. If you can't get a yard, you don't deserve to win the game, is my saying. And Ottawa, drives get the ball in their 20 in the fourth quarter on the road. You're down, and they get to the 1, and it's 3rd and 1, and you don't think you can punch it in from the 1 yard line with a quarterback or do anything, and they kick the field goal. And so Saskatchewan has the big return, and they kick a 54-yarder to beat Ottawa. I mean, Ottawa just blew it 2 weeks in a row at the goal line with chances to win, and they don't have any wins. I don't know if they told Crum to take it easy after he was getting, he got hit around really good last week, and he did not run the ball at all. 4 attempts, but when you're in the red zone there, you need a touchdown to force them to score a touchdown. They couldn't put it in from the 1, and they didn't even want to try. So I guess Ottawa did deserve to lose if you can't do that. So that's a tough one for them. Ottawa's fascinating to me because it just seemed like their season was done with the Masoli injury. Wasn't going well, and Crum has these awesome comebacks, and they had chances to win the last 2 weeks, but they can't get it done in the red zone. I think it's a big problem for them.
Yeah, well, listen, the Ticats are a mess. See Milanovic taking over for Tommy Condell as OC there. Montreal has actually been pretty good, and we'll hook up with Moe, I guess, maybe later on in the week, talk a little bit more about that team, but also how things are working in Habville and the reaction to the big trade that we had a little earlier. And I mean, Toronto's still obviously the team to beat. But again, there's been a lot of teams that have looked like world beaters in the first 6 games of a season that have turned out to be pretty average later on. I'm not saying that's happening with the Argos, but I mean, I think there was maybe a little bit of a dose of reality in that game against Calgary on the weekend. So once again, all is right in the world. Bombers are smashing teams and number 1 in the power poll, at least our WST power poll here as we get ready for week 10 in the Canadian Football League. Again, just 3 games, and we'll maybe touch on those in just a minute. Speaking, I saw some folks in the chat say that I looked blurry, and then I came back out, and no, it wasn't the 1919, although, man, does 1919 and generic lager ever go good with long days in the boat and some good friends. Had a couple on the weekend when we were out there. Of course, Little Brown Jug's got so much going on this summer. Check out the website for their programming at littlebrownjug.ca. As if you need a reason to head down to the brewery and tap room on William Avenue to try all the amazing Little Brown Jug beers, which are also available in cans for take home right at the brewery and tap room. And while the LCs are closed, you can certainly get it anywhere that sells good beer at fine beer stores throughout the city. And they do have citywide delivery as well. You can find out more online at littlebrownjug.ca. Big weekend for the Winnipeg Goldeyes coming up. And I'm going to go to the game tonight, starting a new series this evening. And that'll be a part of the Reggie Abercrombie night and, of course, celebration with the luncheon on Friday. If you'd like to attend, I'm sure there's still some tickets left. You can get it, Jan Chase, over at the Goldeyes office for Friday. It's a noon hour, like a lunchtime event for Reggie Abercrombie, the best to ever do it, the home run king of the American Association, and truly one of the most colorful characters we've had in pro sports in Winnipeg for a long time. So really looking forward to that. And, of course, Bark at the Park is coming up on Saturday, maybe the most popular game of the year. So get over to goldeyes.com. Get ready for another big, big homestand for the Fish, who are back at it tonight. We are going to get to our Coolbet lines. We are going to also get ready to do a little bit of a golf giveaway check out our Instagram for Aquatech. We've got 2 3-packs of tournament passes, which will get you in from Thursday through Sunday. Check out that on Instagram. And as far as the weekly golf report for our friends at Breezy Bend, it's playoff time after Lucas Glover won the Wyndham Championship on the weekend. Now it's the top 70. Justin Thomas finishing just outside. He'll have to hope that he gets a call as a captain's pick for the Ryder Cup team. But yes, the FedEx Cup playoffs begin now with the top 70. We'll be all over on the program. And of course, our golf reports are all brought to you by Breezy Bend. 7th and 15th holes are now open, or the brand new greens. Course has never looked better. If you're thinking about an amazing long-term golfing home for you and your family, get on the waiting list for 2024. Find out more at breezybend.ca or give our pal Corey Johnson a call. And again, if you missed the show right off the bat, I did give a big thank you to our friends at Aitken's Lake. Just had, again, favorite weekend of the year out there on the water, catching big fish, having amazing meals on the shore with the stuff that these guys do with the shore lunches blows me away pretty much every time. And then the incredible hospitality back at the camp. It was, it's hard to describe how great it is, but as I say, as great as the world-class fishing is, the only thing better is the amazing world-class hospitality of the Terrens. Find out more online, aikenslake.ca, and there's just some pictures of the fellas when we were doing our thing, wrapping it up out at Aikens Lake. But yeah, aikenslake.com and at Aikens Lake on Twitter if you want to get in touch with our pal Pitt Terren. All right, let's get to these Coolbet lines. We'll get to the CFL first. Remo, Elks, 12.5-point home underdogs to the Bombers. And I was wondering how big this number would be after what the Bombers did to BC, and considering what everyone has been doing to Edmonton at Commonwealth for the better part of the last 4 seasons.
Yeah, is that enough points? 12.5. They are going with Trey Ford at quarterback. I'm not really sure how that's going to go. So, the Bombers put up 50, and the Elks not very good. I don't know if that's enough, Huss. 12.5. What did they win by?
I don't know if it is.
Here? Seems low.
They actually covered. The Elks covered that.
They covered,
game
but it was really close.
I think it was a 14-point game, and I think the number was 14.5 or 15 or so. So yeah, Edmonton did barely cover that. But man, when you think about the way the Bomber defense played last week against BC, Trey Ford's coming in. I mean, this is the last gasp, I guess, for the Edmonton offense. So yeah, as of right now, 12.5, and who knows, that could go up. I don't think there's going to be a lot of steam in on the home underdog in Edmonton, considering what's happening. Montreal and Saskatchewan's an interesting game. The Alouettes, who are looking quite good, 4.5-point favorites at home to the Riders with Mason Fine, and then the BC Lions, an angry BC Lions team, hosting the Calgary Stampeders after a massive win over the undefeated Toronto Argonauts. 6 points in those games. And it is funny, the Bombers were, for the first time in a while, not the favorites anymore to win the Grey Cup. Well, they're back at it, although they are tied right now with the Argos, plus 225 on both sides, and a bit of a market correction for the BC Lions after they got their asses kicked the way they did in Winnipeg, plus 350. But it's really those 3 teams and everybody else. And if you do, we were talking on this on the Lock Shop and we got odds made on it. If you do think that the Elks have a chance to go on a bit of a run here and some of the other teams will fade and they can be 25-1 to make the playoffs. That one took a hit on the weekend, though, with the wins by Saskatchewan and Calgary. But we also have bets that you can make as to when the Elks' first home win will come. The game this weekend against Winnipeg, plus 475. Most likely one, it says August 27th against Ottawa, plus 190. And it's plus 290 for no home win this year. All there in the CFL futures department. Let's get over to the Blue Jays tonight. Jays back in action, taking on the Cleveland Guardians. And the Jays are a slight favorite, minus 128. My guy Kikuchi, after that big pitching performance he had last out when they really needed it against the Orioles, he's back on the mound tonight. Tanner Bibby for Cleveland and the Guardians tonight. Big slate of games, though. Very busy night in the majors. Pretty much everybody in action tonight. And we also do have some tennis going on. It's the ATP event in Toronto, the Rogers Cup. We got Felix Auger-Aliassime in action tonight. And then on the women's side, I know Bianca Andreescu and Leila Annie Fernandez are both in action tonight. Let's see, who is Leila playing, or is she already out? She's already on the ice or on the court? Because there is a exclusive that we've got up here for maybe that's off because she's already started to play, but it was plus 330 for Bianca, Leila, and Felix all to win their first round matches. Bunch of daily exclusive for the majors and Blue Jays as well. And Patty's even got a lacrosse exclusive up. God, they got a lot of lacrosse up there. Anyways, it's all up there at Coolbet. Very soon, we've got NFL preseason action, getting it going in earnest on Thursday night. And again, I often say there's nothing more degen than betting the preseason in the NFL. That being said, I'm 1-0 after the Browns had that comeback in the Hall of Fame game last week. Use the promo code WST over at Coolbet. If you haven't used it before, you'll get a 100% bonus on your first deposit up to $200 with the promo code WST. Remo, I guess we should talk about the Derby last night. Of course, I was off the grid on Friday when Kirk joined you and won the marble race incredibly. We had a bit of a big upset. Everybody was all over the favorite, but the favorite got nipped at the end.
Yeah, it was great night at the Downs yesterday. Tons of live racing and events, and I did wager on the Derby, and I took Bert's advice. I should have. It was heroic move. Ended up as a huge favorite, 1-5 odds.
Whoa!
Like insane. So I just lock button that one, and he mentioned Shibui, and we talked about Mano Dura, who's owned by Henry Witt, and it was Mano Dura with the big upset at 12-1, ending at 15-1, and it was heroic move number 2, and Shibui number 3. The other hosts we mentioned, we talked a lot about Robertino Diodoro, who trained the horses who finished first, second, and third last year. He's the trainer of Heroic Move, also the trainer of B Minor. I had B Minor in there, so I was kind of kicking myself for being stupid and not just including Heroic Move. But you get fooled into these big odds, Hess. You think there's no way Heroic Move is going to lose with those odds, but hey, It's horse racing. There's upsets all the time, and you got to put that in your range of outcomes. So Mano Dura, a $2 ticket, paid $32 to win, and you had the $1 trifecta, $91.15 there.
Wow, $1 superfecta.
Yeah,
$4,129.
There was huge jackpots on the pick 5 and pick 3. I was on the pick 4. I was on the pick 4. If you had the $1 pick 4, $800. The 20-cent pick 5 there would have paid you $1,137, which is crazy. So great night at the Downs. Unfortunately, I did not come out on the positive, but I did enjoy watching all the races. Rob Noakes, I see Rob Noakes in chat. He knows a thing or two about horse racing. He thought he was all in. He was touting Heroic Move for a while. He says I should have boxed it. I messed up. I just lock buttoned Heroic Move. Everyone's like, oh, it's not going to lose Heroic Move. And I screwed up. I don't know. I wasn't thinking straight. I don't know. I messed up there, so I didn't win.
Let's get to our picks for today.
Okay, you go first. I've been posting this thing on Instagram, so I'm a bit behind.
Oh, okay.
On the picks. So give me I looked at it quickly. So give me a second here. Give me a second.
No problem. We will do exactly that. By the way, shout out to everyone in chat. Here's the second why not question of the day, and see if anyone will actually own up to this. How many of you watched the Jake Paul Nate Diaz fight on Saturday night? Tell the truth.
I did.
You did.
It's terrible.
Not surprising. So I guess, and again, I didn't see it. A bunch of the guides caught it, and they told us the next day that Diaz would kind of turn around and walk away. He was basically trolling the troll, which is quite interesting. But I will admit, I'm quite intrigued at this talk that these guys are going to run it back in an MMA fight.
I don't think that that's true. You told me that people were saying that. I couldn't find that online. I don't think. Why would Jake Paul do that? He just wants to fight old guys who aren't boxers.
No, he says he's going to be world champion by 2026.
I turned it off before I was getting tired because it was so terrible. I turned it off before the decision. I was like, I don't need to see this. I'm done. Like, I watched SummerSlam and that was way better. And I'm sitting here. I'm like, why? Like, why do people watch these? Like, and everyone on my ex Twitter timeline is talking about this Jake Paul, Nate Diaz fight. These guys aren't good boxers. There's no title on the line.
Jake Paul apparently is a good boxer. No. I saw him on with Stephen A.
Why doesn't he fight a boxer? He only fights MMA guys. Over the hill MMA fighters like Tyrone Woodley, who are almost 40, and Nate Diaz. Like, everyone watch. I don't know why people care and why people watch these. And meanwhile, I'm sitting there watching it. So
you mean like you?
Like me? Yeah, like me. I don't know. And people are like texting me, "Hey, who'd you got in the?" Like, I know people were betting on this. I don't like. He does a great job at promoting himself. The Paul brand. Like, everyone's talking about Logan Paul, who's at SummerSlam, didn't change, and then showed up at the show. Was it in Detroit at SummerSlam? Was up in Dallas at his brother's fight, still wearing his ring attire. I mean, these guys do a great job promoting themselves.
Yeah, there's a couple. Gregory, not me. I was watching WWE SummerSlam from Ford Field in Detroit. Excellent. And I did see Isha Boy Bruce say that Logan Paul is a decent wrestler, though. Hate to admit it.
He's good.
He's good. He's amazing. He is, for a guy. I mean, you can tell. I mean, he's just a hell of an athlete. And he's kind of come in and done some pretty amazing things in a very limited amount of time in a WWE ring. He was there. I had a PVR, watched some of it yesterday when I got home. Jimmy Uso, how could you, Jimmy? How do you turn on your brother like that? I mean, come on.
Man, Michael Cole's commentary on that was elite.
He's amazing, Michael Cole. But anyways, there was some pretty good action on that. My pick of Finn Balor didn't happen. But and I guess Raw was last night. I didn't catch it, but SmackDown will be big on the weekend. This Bloodline storyline never seems to end. But I guess maybe it'll be Jimmy versus Jay at WrestleMania. That'll be something. All right, let's get to these races for tonight.
I'm good. I got my picks in.
Looking here, and Wits Rojo. That was the one that came up big for me last week.
Okay, I need to get it.
It's back in it. Although it's a 6 furlong. He won at 6. This one's 7.5. So sometimes I like to jump on those other ones. All right, let's get to what I do have in already for tonight.
Yeah, I got some in too.
Okay, race number 1. Mm-hmm. I'm going with a 1-5 exacta. 1 Russian Pearl, 5 Mechanic Susie. Not a box, just a straight $2.
Oh, okay.
I'm feeling Russian Pearl right now, and I went with Mechanic Susie as second. What about you?
I'm got it race 2. I don't have race 1.
Okay, race 2. I'm just slamming 5 to win on Dixie Moe, number 1.
Dixie Moe? No, I'm an exacta on 5-6 Wits 10-10 and Tiz Hoppin. That's a box exacta.
Nice, yeah, and Wits 10-10's in there too. Well, Dixie Moe's the guy. All right, race number 3.
Mm-hmm.
I've got a triactor box.
Okay.
2, 6, and 7 Bits of Lemon Drop, Miami Souvenirs, and Dazzling Gold.
Okay, I got Dazzling Gold to win on this one.
Right on. Don't have race 4. Do you?
No, I'm 5 and 6.
All right. Race 5, I've got a triactor box.
Okay.
2. Wait a second. Did I say 2, 4, and 5? Yeah, that's right. 2, 4, and 5. Bottle of Smoke, Rail Splitter, Behaving Myself. I feel bad not pick and ride them. That's the one that my buddies bought, sold, and bought again.
Oh, Staff Max Stable?
Exactly. And like Chow Dog, he's part of the stable. He's part of the
Oh,
part
really?
of the crew. Yeah.
I took Ride 'em to win, so you don't have to feel so bad.
Well, listen, if it was 6 furlongs, I'd probably jump on Ride 'em, but I don't think it's as good at 7.5 or a mile.
Yeah, that's a lot more furlongs. My math says it's 1.5 more. It's a big difference.
Hey, it is. It really is.
And then race 6, I got a trifecta box. 4, 6, 7, Blazing Bow for Beau Bichette. He's on the IL. I think he's coming back later this week. Win America and Properly Connected.
It's funny. I'm actually fading Blazing Bow, and I'm just going with a exacta box of Win America and Properly Connected.
Okay, so we're kind of in this one, sure.
Yeah,
we have some overlap tonight.
We do, and I guess I need to make an extra wager for because I missed yesterday. I'll do 30 the next 2 days.
Sure, throw some extra dollars in.
I see Uncle Mo's cats in there, probably not looking. White
What about
Spirit.
Wits Rojo?
Well, I really like. I sort of owe it to Wits Rojo for.
I think if a horse wins for you, you just have to bet it forever every time it races. That's what I do with McCaig and Maybella. Who's the other one? I got the Comrie rule. I got a nice stable. It's like in fantasy baseball. All my friends make fun of me that I pick the same guys over and over again, and same thing with horse racing. I just go with the same guys.
Terra Tattoo is there. Maybe I'll do that. We'll go Terra Tattoo and Wits Rojo. And what about Runaway Hurricane? There we go. Okay, yeah. So 3, 4, 7. And I think that should get me to about 30, and I'll do the same thing tomorrow. Wits Rojo. We're not taking Papa Oscar whiskey, or should we? Okay, let's take we actually went 3, 4, 5. All right, there you go. You can use the AS Downs YouTube site if you want to watch the races as they happen. And again, if you want to make a wager, you can do it over at HPIBet.com. Should we do a moment of silence for Team USA at the Women's World Cup?
I don't know. We need a moment of silence.
Did they lose? Did they lose because they are too woke? That seems to be a hot take on X these days.
I think they lost because they couldn't hit the net on penalties. I think if you can't hit the net, you're going to have a bad time. And Team USA women had a bad time. So you need to be smiling about it after or earlier. And scoring for them was a problem this year. I don't know what they do. I'm sure they'll be back and competing, but a new team will be crowned champion at the FIFA Women's World Cup this year.
Yeah, I'm on Japan. Japan 6-1 to win. They've looked amazing. Very, very fun team to cheer for. I'll be on Japan. And I actually did win a little Colombia-France parlay last night in the middle of the night. Yeah.
You up late? Man, I get the TSN alerts at like midnight. All right. FIFA Women's World Cup's underway. I'm like, man, it's so late. Although I actually was watching the TSN app, the TSN Plus the other night. I was watching the basketball. There was Ultimate on there that I put on some rando sports. Maybe because it's Ocho week, but yeah, this Women's World Cup's good, Huss. If you're up at like midnight, still jonesing for sports to watch.
Yeah, many of the game. The Spain-Netherlands game is actually going to go at 8 o'clock, which is wild. 8 o'clock on Thursday night. So basically right around when the Bombers starting. I guess that's like a morning game over in Australia. I don't know. Anyways, I guess they'll get some good, I would assume they'll get some good numbers in Spain and the Netherlands. Netherlands a big underdog in that one. I might put a little sprinkle on them. And then Japan and Sweden, Australia, France, England, and Colombia. Those are your final 8. The quarterfinals at the FIFA Women's World Cup. All right, just before we go, we talked about this Jake Paul, Nate Diaz fight. We talked about Roman Reigns and Jimmy Uso and wrestling. We have not talked about far and away the best fight of the weekend. And that fight, Remo, was Jose Ramirez knocking Tim Anderson the F out in a baseball brawl. Like, there has been brawls. Well, I shouldn't say that. That wasn't the best fight of the week. The best fight of the week by far was the Alabama Riverboat Brawl, which I'm sure you've seen over and over again on social media. But in Major League Baseball, Tim Anderson dropping the gloves, squaring up as a southpaw, and then getting knocked the bleep out by Ramirez. I can't remember in my life a knockout punch like that in a baseball fight before. It really was something.
Yeah, you don't see that too often. I couldn't really figure out what led to that. It seemed like such a nothing
sliding
play
between a guy's legs.
So Jose Ramirez slid in, and he didn't like, I guess, the force that Tim Anderson used to apply the tag, and said Tim Anderson had been disrespecting the game for a while, and this was through a translator after. And I think that's how these things go. It's, these teams play all the time. They're in the same division. It's not just like one thing. You had enough, and they squared up. And yeah, it's funny. The ump's in there, and he sees these two guys fighting, and backed away like he's a ref in a boxing match. You don't see that too often where a guy gets popped. You think about Odor and Bautista. That was one. Always talk about Robin Ventura and Nolan Ryan, but this has got to be up there. You don't see a guy take a punch.
Caught him full swing right on the chin, and down goes Anderson. Have you heard the Cleveland radio call?
Yes.
Of that?
He's incredible.
It was
down goes Anderson.
I mean, honestly, that was one of the great fight call. I mean, that was right up there with it sounded like it was a heavyweight tilt, like for the championship, like Tyson Fury. But no, it was Tim Anderson and Jose Ramirez. Find that out if you can find the radio call of that. It is absolutely well worth it. Great show today, and great to be back. Great job on Friday holding it down, Remo. And as I say, you might have to do that on this Friday as well, depending on how long this event goes at the ballpark. I guess I'll find out a little bit more tonight. I'm going to go down and meet our pal Andrew Collier, take in some of the game, get some more info on the big Reggie Abercrombie event on Friday. And then the jersey goes up into the rafters on Friday night. And then Saturday is going to be Bark at the Park, which should be a heck of a lot of fun as well. Great stuff, folks. Thanks so much for being with us. Tell a friend about Winnipeg Sports Talk, where they can find us, and get on over to our Instagram page and enter to win tournament passes for 3. We've got a couple prizes to give away, courtesy of our friends over at Aquatech. Should be a really, really fun event. Thanks again to all the sponsors, and Jeff Hamilton, who joined us. Tomorrow, I believe Murat's going to jump on. I'm going to get into our percentage game with Murat as well, see where his head's at as we get into the season, as well as a little bit more on a very, very unique trade in the National Hockey League, and we'll see what he has to say about that. More on the Bombers as they get ready to head out to Edmonton tomorrow to extend the Elks' home losing streak and to stay on top of the Western Division. But great show today. Thanks to everyone that joined us. As I mentioned, tell a friend about WST and how they can subscribe. And if you haven't already, make sure to hit that red subscribe button on your way out. We'll be back tomorrow at 1 p.m. with another big show here on Winnipeg Sports Talk. Thanks for hanging with us, everyone.
Oh, my God! Oh! Shut it down! Let's go home!
Thanks for tuning in to Winnipeg Sports Talk Daily. Make sure to subscribe on YouTube and your favorite podcast feed at winnipegsportstalk.com.